We often mirror each other unconsciously. We mirror the behaviors of the person we're interacting with, the emotions of the person we interact with, the triggers. And as someone who's been meditating for like 7 years, this is so obvious. I remember when I really began to grasp this and became very conscious of it. It was after my second meditation retreat. I was really getting this at an intuitive, energetic level. And it was just absolutely mind-blowing. I would watch one person get triggered, and predictably, the person they were interacting with would get triggered because they were both not really aware of themselves at that time, and they would both fall into this trap. One person's triggers would activate the triggers of another person, right? And it's the same thing with, if you give someone a lot of love, they'll often love you back, unless they're like a narcissist or something. So we actually have mirror neurons that play a critical role in unconsciously mirroring each other. Basically, they enable us to intuitively understand and replicate other people's emotions and behaviors. Right? This is a very interesting phenomenon. They facilitate empathy and social bonding. When we're mirroring each other, we feel more connected to each other. And when the depth of the connection, when it gets deeper, it can actually also trigger us. It can activate wounds as well. So our mirror neurons help us to mimic and resonate with the behaviors and feelings of those around us. They basically contribute to unconscious mirroring, which is just observed in various interpersonal interactions. So I have a lot of points that I want to talk about and ways that we go about mirroring each other. So the first one, like I said earlier, is triggers. When someone gets triggered and you're interacting with them, it's easy for you to get triggered. And when you're triggered and you're interacting with someone, you'll most likely bring something out of them that can trigger them. Unless you guys are really present, you're really conscious, you're grounded in your body, you're aware of your thoughts, you're aware of your sensations. All this stuff isn't just hijacking you, right? Basically, by becoming aware of this one thing, this is going to help you with relationships for the rest of your life. To notice that when one person is triggered, it replicates itself in the other person, right? And I want you to start pointing that lens onto interpersonal situations, looking at other people, right? Not to judge them, but just to see it, right? Validate this in experience and notice it in yourself, especially in yourself. This is the most important one in you so that you can heal these triggers. Next is just the projection of unresolved issues. We impose our unresolved issues onto other people, basically seeing our problems in them. We have unconscious things that we don't like to acknowledge about ourselves. That stuff gets unconsciously projected onto the other people, onto the other person, usually in the form of things that we hate about them. So people who really trigger you, right, they are usually pointing to things that exist inside of you that you are avoiding, that you actually see in them in some kind of subtle way, something that you feel in them as well. So when one person starts projecting onto the other person, it's usually the exact same thing. Is this not just exactly what's going on in most politics nowadays? It's like two groups of apes just throwing shit back and forth at each other. Emotional contagion is another point. When you are interacting with someone, the emotions, there's a flow. There's a flow of energy between you two, and you're actually adopting each other's emotions. There's an emotional transfer, right? So they basically spread between people, basically affecting everyone's mood. And a really funny story, I was flying to Bali, and I was in the airport. This was quite a while ago. And there was a girl who was lost from her mom, and there was a whole bunch of people around, and no one was helping her. So I'm like, okay, I gotta do something about this. She's there and overwhelmed and clearly lost. And I told her I was gonna help her and we'll find her mom. Right, and we ended up finding her mom, and everything was all good. And the moment that I stepped up, and I could intuitively and energetically sense that she saw me as her protector, there was a massive transfer of energy. So when there's a parent to a child, for example, this is the biggest exchange. This is by far the biggest exchange of energy, basically emotional contagion, right? When I would start to have a little bit less hope, right, in finding your mom, she would start to feel that, and I could sense that she would just pick that up from me. I could really deeply sense this instinctual, intuitive, energetic movement happening between us, and that I was basically reproducing my state in her, right? She was kind of getting attached to me because I was her only source of protection. She felt safe around me, she trusted me, and she naturally started to feel attached to me because of that. And it was the same thing with you when you were a kid and your parents. Emotional contagion happened, and they were just kind of reproducing their emotional, energetic state inside you, their psychological state, right? Because reproduction isn't just like a physical reproduction, it's also psychological, energetic, emotional, behavioral. There's a whole lot of other things that get reproduced. The next thing is complementary wounds. People in intimate relationships often attract partners who reflect their specific wounds, and then they trigger each other. The reasons why we get attracted to people are pretty complicated and for the most part, in a lot of ways, completely unknown. But one out of many reasons is because we actually sense that that person is also triggering things in us that we like to avoid. And when we begin to really connect with that person on a deeper level, these things can come out of us. And they do come out of us. Right? So when we're not aware of this dynamic, we can just create a cycle of hurt between each other, which completely ruins the relationship. Next is defensive mechanisms. When one person gets defensive, the other person gets defensive, right? So in the context of an intimate relationship, because why not? When one person is kind of seeming a little bit threatening, right? The other person can also appear threatening, and they're both kind of like defensive and like on edge, right? Basically, you want to notice how the state that someone is feeling reproduces itself into the other person. And in the context of your specific life, your state can get reproduced onto someone, and someone's state get reproduced onto you, right? Next is trauma bonds. Basically, a lot of connections can be based on shared past traumas, creating a strong, although potentially unhealthy bond. Right? So basically, it's like these boundaries that separate people begin to break down, and we feel more unified with them for potentially better or worse. Right? So when there's a situation that's unhealthy, right, this is why you actually need to have boundaries. You actually have to learn how to assert certain needs, or separate yourself, or bring it up, bring up the problems that you're experiencing into conscious awareness so that they can really be healed. Next is the reinforcement of limiting beliefs. People will reinforce their limiting beliefs onto other people and project them, and this can, of course, reproduce itself into the other person. You can reproduce it into other people can reproduce it into you, and this is the story of humanity. Next is power dynamics. Basically, power imbalances can create forms of conflict and tension, and this whole thing begins to mirror in the people. Of course, role playing as well. Basically, we often act out assigned roles based off past experiences. This being a pretty interesting one. Communication breakdowns as well. When one person begins to fail their communication, it's pretty easy to kind of get reactive, and then also yeah, you basically understand. It creates that whole cycle. So the whole point here is that this is basically subconscious and unconscious pattern repetition. And we unconsciously just repeat these patterns because they're deeply ingrained in us, and that they've basically programmed us, or they've been programmed into us, through past experiences, past relationships, past wounds, avoidance patterns. Basically, we'll leave it very general, past experiences. And that these patterns are playing themselves out in a specific context where there's something to trigger them, and it's giving us the opportunity to heal. So that's it for this video. Notice this on a very practical level. The next time you're in conflict with someone, notice that your body starts to get tense, you start to feel uncomfortable, they're feeling uncomfortable, and it's like you're mirroring each other. The next time you feel very intimate with someone, right, you can really, if you're paying attention to the pure feeling of the situation, you really got to develop your intuition to really grasp this at a deep level. Oh my God, the most beautiful bird just landed next to me. Wow. Oh, this is absolutely fantastic. That was gorgeous. That was fantastic. That was heavenly. So yeah, you gotta develop your intuition to really see this one clearly. Next time someone else gets triggered, notice that you start to get triggered, and vice versa. Basically take this information and apply it to your life. That's it for this video. You can apply for one-to-one coaching. Link is in my description. It's also in the pinned comment. And I really only take people who are very sincere about raising their consciousness and making these kinds of deep changes to their lives. I find that to be just the most rewarding for me and the other person. And it just works out the best on many levels. Take it easy.